Go ahead.
Joey Strub here, Bikeman Performance. Today we're going to show you how easy it is to add horsepower to a Pro R by installing cams. We're going to get this bad boy up to 300 horse. So we're starting with an engine that is completely unshrouded. So when working on a Pro R, obviously you're going to want to gain access, but this engine's on the dyno and we're going to show you the base engine part of it. So whatever you have to do to get access to the engine, that's on you. We're going to show you how to do this. So it's pretty easy. First step, we're just going to unplug the coils. Then we're going to pop these up. And we're going to get this out of the way. So now you're going to want to grab a 8 mil and 10 mil with power tool, pop the coils out. Now you're going to want to undo the coolant coming out the top of the head. You'll have a quick connect. On this one, the quick connect's a little different because this is my dyno apparatus. Basically, you just want to release the tabs, pop that out. You're going to want to make sure that you've drained coolant below this portion of the head, just so it doesn't spill everywhere. All right, now you can grab a T40. A T40, we'll pop all these out. Now, okay, now we'll just grab a regular pliers. We'll pop the vapor hose off. Could put that off to the side. Now at this point in time, the valve cover can come loose. Now we'll lift the valve cover off. Comes off pretty easy. Make sure that none of the gaskets stuck. There's gaskets for the spark plug holes. Make sure that they didn't come off with it. Right here, these 4. You need those when you put it back together, otherwise you're gonna have oil going everywhere. And we're going to want to roll the engine over until you see the I on top on the intake cam and the E on top on the exhaust cam. So we're going to want to go, you want to roll it this way always. Yeah. Yeah, this. And once I get it there, I'll show you what it looks like. And you are fighting compression here, so it might take a little bit. And then right when you're at top dead center. So then we got the cam alignment tool. When you're at the right index markings, the cam alignment tool will line up perfect and it'll drop in the slots on this side of your cams. So that's when you know you are at top dead center with the engine. Now, what I do is I take like a silver Sharpie and I'll go right off this line right here and I'll make a mark so that I know that this is exactly top dead center. So when this line and this line line up, that is top dead center. I've already marked this in the past, so, and then that is your top dead center marking. That way you know that if things get bumped or whatever, you can always verify that yes, I'm at top dead center. And then if this is in when we go back together, you know that the cam timing is correct. So now from here, we want to take out the cam chain tensioner plate, which is a 8mm, and it comes out pretty easy. So this one you just gotta loosen up, and then usually take the whole way out. And then this plate comes right off. And that is where the cam chain tensioner is. So now from here, we're going to take out 2 more bolts.
You want to just point where those are real quick?
Yeah, so they are right there and there. Now, we're going to pop this out of there. So you just take like a pry bar and you can pop it out. And I'll show you how to get this reset afterwards. So now there is no pressure on the cam chain, so this is what holds that in there. Now we'll take out the cam covers and we'll start at the outside and work our way in. So first, we'll pull out the end. And I still have the inner 4 in each cam cap. If you were to take out everything but an outside one, you can create pressure and you could actually break the cap. So we don't want to do that. Now it's a 10 for the M2. So now this will come right off. Just wiggle it. Break the suction. It's got a liquid oil suction kind of tension on there. So pop that off. Put it in the same order that it goes in. So I always set them on the bench in the same order. That way you don't get them confused and you don't get them trying to put in the wrong spot. Now we'll pop off the outside first. Now this is going to have tension on this one, so when this comes up, you'll see the whole thing work its way up. These are different, so you'll see that the one on the end, towards the gears, has a plate on it. The other one does not. So this actually feeds oil from one side to the other, where this one doesn't. Yeah, so another good tip is every layer of bolts you take off, if you're not experienced doing it, put them in Ziploc bags. So step 1, taking off, put that in a bag, write what it is. Step 2, put that in a bag, write what it is. That way you don't end up trying to put the wrong bolts in the wrong situation. And at each step, if you take a picture with your cell phone or whatever, it'll let you know where stuff is. And sometimes if you lose your place or forget how something goes, you can zoom in a photo and really easy see what that step is and whatnot. And I do recommend getting a Polaris manual if you don't have one. Now from here, super easy. We just take off the, lift up a little bit, pop the cam chain off, and then from here, we'll just leave that there. This is the exhaust cam. So we're going to want to swap the gear out to the other one. And I'm going to do that by going over to this other bench. I'm going to put a towel down. Because we don't want to, cams are very brittle. We want to make sure that we're not going to break the cam. So I'm going to set it on here. and we're going to swap the gear to the new cam.
So you want
Yeah,
to
yeah, so the exhaust cam and the intake cam are different. The exhaust cam does not have a timing wheel on this side. The intake cam does, and they use that for camshaft position. So these are a little bit of a struggle to get loose by hand. I'll show you what I do. So you're going to want to grab onto this thing really tight and then hit it with an impact to get it loose. They're super tight. You can see, even with a towel and a glove, never do that hanging onto this cam because it's got sharp edges and it will cut your fingers. So let me take this off.
maybe say something to the point too, where don't put it in a vise.
Right. Yeah, and definitely do not put a cam in a vise. If they're stressed, they'll crack and your cams are worthless. So we'll take this, put it off the side, we'll grab the new cam. There we go. So now you'll see on the end of this, there's a little like detent. On the back side of the gear, you'll see that there's a little tab. You want to make sure that that lines up in that detent. You can see right here. So in the cam box, I mean, you're going to want to keep, there's not an individual marking on the cam that says, you know, it's different. Obviously, if you're taking out a stock cam, it's not going to have the BC right here. Our cams will say BC. So now.
But they're two different though, right? The two in the box.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, you want to definitely make sure that the one you grab doesn't have the timing gear if you're doing an exhaust cam. Right. Once we go to the intake cam, it'll have the timing wheel on it.
All right, you want to just say that again? I wasn't pointing towards you. Sorry.
Yeah, so, and make sure that when you grab the new cam, it's the cam without the gear if you're doing the exhaust one, or on the next one, while you're doing the intake one, it's the cam with the timing gear on it. And so when you transfer over, you're doing it for the same one. Just in case you're worried, the gears are the same. So when you put it back together, if you switch the gears back and forth, as long as you get the cam in the right place, that's what matters. Get that nice and tight. Now this one's ready to drop in. You're going to want to get a cam holder and like however you have to hold this end gear and torque this to Polaris spec. I err on the side of over torque versus under torque because you don't want this cam gear to come off. All right, come on back over. So now when we put this gear back in, we're going to want to make sure that it's not going in dry. So I take oil in a bottle. You can even use like a break-in additive, and you just go right down the whole thing like this. There we go. There's the... So now the same thing with the intake cam. You can tell it's the intake cam because it's got the timing marks on it. This is a good view of the timing marks just so you can see it. You can also see that slot that we're putting that plate in. right, so we want to look for the detent, line up the gear. Lube up the thing so it's not dry. I'm using a engine break-in oil additive to do it because it's a little bit thicker and it gives a little bit more protection on first startup.
Alternative, probably your normal.
Alternative would be your typical engine oil that you use in it, like it's like the Polaris PS Extreme. Now I get this one. There. So the intake cam will line up almost exactly where it should. The exhaust cam will be sitting up a little bit higher, so it may be a hair off. But when we put the bar in on the backside, and if it lines up, they're correct. All right. Ooh. Yeah, so this now, once I get it lined up with the cam alignment tool, the intake cam is right and the exhaust cam is lined up with it, I'll put a zip tie over the chain so that it can't jump teeth. And then we cut this off after we're installed. Doesn't take much to keep it in place. So now the fun part. So what we want to do now is take the self-adjuster. So we have to pull the inside out of it. And then now from here, so now we have to take this and then grab it with the pliers and you turn it into place. There. It'll catch when it's in place. Now we have to put this back in the adjuster, the tensioner, and you'll see a little hole right there. So you're going to want to line that up with the hole, and then we have to put it in a vise, and then you use anything that you can fit in there. They make little pins or like a little piece of wire or whatever, but you have to put something in here, and that'll hold the chain tensioner in place. So let's go to the vise now. There. Let's wipe this off. Just push it in until it's the whole way in. And then you put the rod in place. When the rod's in place, it'll hold everything together. So now from here, we can get this back in there.
I know you're probably going to say it, but just make sure it's down verbally to take that out, because they could have a small piece.
Right, yeah, for sure. So you take the bolts for this, get them in. Now these are going to get torqued down to 100 inch-pounds.
You have another set of these or no?
What?
The cams?
Yeah.
Because I should have taken some photos or something.
No, I got a set. The set I took out are actually
Pretty similar.
the same ones, except for different timing, because we're just trying new stuff.
Oh, it's those aren't OEM. Those
No.
are they had made.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So is this final set or?
Well, if they work perfect, then they are. Thought there was a little bit left.
Think they're close?
Yeah.
Oh, so you're just adding more?
Yeah, we thought there was a little bit left on the table with the other one, so we made a small change and just trying to get the most out. So now we're torqued down. We'll still leave this in here until we get these bolted down.
Let's do a quick little move. Hey, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, good. So maybe just point out again the different things just to double make sure. Two different sides.
Yeah. So now that these are going back in, make sure that you didn't lose the O-rings before you drop them in. Make sure that the one without the cap is towards the front of the engine and the one with the cap is towards the rear. Now we're going to want to tighten these down by hand, and we're going to want to do them real evenly. So we'll do X patterns in the middle and we'll pull the cams down together. So that way we don't put extra force on the outside and jeopardize breaking a cap. Yeah, so on these, they're designed to be installed without Loctite. Putting Loctite in is only going to make it harder if you ever have to take it apart. The natural friction between steel and aluminum when it's torqued to spec on an engine that doesn't vibrate and run smooth like this engine does. If you're in a Harley or something like that, obviously that's a different animal just because they shake. But on smooth running motors, usually there's no Loctite. So we'll take, and I do these by hand. You don't ever want to use an impact while putting engine components together. Yeah, and one of the main reasons you put things together by hand is, for one, you don't want to shock the threads. You have a chance of pulling the threads out. And also, if you put it in by hand, if anything's not lined up, you're going to feel it versus jam a cross thread situation and wreck a really expensive head. So always assemble by hand, and then your finished step will be torquing it in. And you can see I'm just kind of walking it back and forth and going together. Not going till it fully bottoms out. Everything should be almost bottomed out before you even think about bottoming out one of them.
I know you might have.
and we're walking both of them down together. We're not going to clamp this one down fully while this one's still untouched. We're going to pull both of them down together from the inside four. That way the cams will get pushed down evenly and you won't create undesired stress on the cap with potentially breaking it. Now we're getting real close. You can see the gap is almost down to nothing. Now we should make sure they're all almost down to nothing before we pull them all in. You can see that gap's just disappearing, which is what it should do. And I just kind of dance around to wherever looks like the most gap. Yeah, and definitely notice we did only the inside four on each cap. We didn't start with the outside. Once these are just snug, not torqued, then we'll bring the outside ones in. And then we'll torque everything together. So now we'll go to the outside since everything's down in. And these just go till they touch. I'm not putting a bunch of force on it. And you can see I'm using a speed stick for this. It's a nice tool that allows you to have full control and full feel while you're tightening something down and know that the threads are going in how they should and how much pressure you're putting on it. And it's not like a ratchet because you don't have even a lot of torque possibility with this. Now we'll get a 10 millimeter, do the end cap. And one of the nice things about going with us for cams is we've gone through all the trial and error, figure out what works, and went through a bunch of revisions to really narrow in on the perfect horsepower curve. And when you get the cam, there's going to be no need for playing with cam timing, duration, lobe separation, or anything like that. It's going to be set up perfect for the CVT setup right out of the box, and it's going to run great. So once we get these all in and torqued down, then we're going to check the valve lash. So I'll get these torqued first. And these I torqued down to Polaris spec. And we start at the inside and we work our way out. And I always do a crisscross pattern. One thing to note too, these caps are matched with this head. You never want to take a set of caps off one head and put them on a different head. Not that most of you ever be in that situation, but just know that these are bolted together before they're line bored So you want to make sure that these caps are with the head, and they will always be serial numbered the same as the head is. So that's definitely something to know. And if you ever see a head for sale without them, it's not worth anything without the caps. Yeah, and that's another good point, that you gotta want to be real careful not to damage these caps, because if you damage these caps, you have to replace the whole head because it's all one assembly and it's bored together. You cannot buy these caps separate one by one.
Is that the same torque setting?
Yep. It's 120 inch-pounds. Now we'll pop the pin out of the tensioner. So that's as easy as just going like that, and the pressure gets in there. Now we'll verify that we're still on our timing point. This is still in here. You can tell it's nice and loose. So at this point in time, we can remove the zip ties that hold everything in alignment, which is pretty easy. Just take a side cutter. And then you want to remove your cam timing plate on this side. Take that, set on the bench out of the way, and then from this point, we'll roll the engine over by hand. So the reason we roll the engine over by hand is to get oil the whole way around the lobes and make sure that everything rolls freely, and allows the tensioner to build up. Spin the oil over, or spin the engine over until you have oil showing at every lobe, and that'll tell you that oil is fully to the top, everything's lubricated before we go to fire this up. But the next step is actually to check the valve lash. So we'll keep rolling this over until we get, or the oil pump is pumping oil to the top of the motor right now. And you can see it come out right at the seam next to the lobe. And you should be able to see that on all of them. So now we'll use a set of feeler gauges. Six. So we want a minimum of 6 for an intake cam. And then to check this, while it's bolted down, you'll look at one that is up. So the 6 fits in there on this one, fits in there on that one. Now we'll look at, may need to roll the engine a little bit to get to all of them.
So you want to be loose or tight?
Well, you want to be at least 6. Ideally, you're between 6 and 8. These cams should be the exact same base circle as the stock cams, but so that one fits in there just perfect. So
you're checking,
yes.
checking when the lobe is pointed straight out.
Yeah, when the lobe is aimed away from the bucket. So it just fits in there. You can feel that one's gonna be right on.
Where do you get like a tool like this?
This would be like any, like auto parts store have them. Tool dealers, like Snap-on dealers have them. Any like precision tool place. Even like pretty much anybody that sells automotive tools should have it. Yeah, this would be between 8 and 10 is perfect. If you're a hair high, so say you had 12, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but you are giving up a little bit of power. So if you were at a scenario where you have excessive lash, then you would want to get a new bucket that is just a hair tighter. And if you measure what size fits in there, you can tell exactly how far to go down. But for the most part, they should just drop right in.
Is there any way to adjust that or no? Or did you just say that?
Yeah, I just said that. Yeah, so we're good here. And this should be exact because BC cams are, both sets were BC cams and they're more accurate than Polaris ones. So we're good. So now from here, we put the plate back on that covers the tensioner. Yeah, and while you're doing this step, double check to make sure you did pull that pin out, because if that pin is still in there, you're not going to have cam tension. You're going to completely trash your motor. So definitely want to make sure that that is out of there. Spin these in by hand first, and then these get torqued to 100 inch-pounds.
Maybe just say a quick note about the engine over to get to it.
Yeah, and make sure you don't forget that bolt behind the balancer there. Now we're ready to put the seals back on, and then we'll drop the cover on. The seals go on. The wider part of the seal goes towards the front of the car. If your engine's fairly new, you can probably get away with reusing these seals. If you have any amount of time on it, you want to put new ones in. Now we'll bring the valve cover in. Now, like the other bolts on these, we're going to want to do these by hand to make sure that they're not cross-threaded, because these do go into your cam caps, and if you strip out one of these, that is replacement of a head. So we want to avoid that at all costs. This is a T40. So on the valve cover, use the rubber seal. Don't think you're going to help it by putting silicone in there. Silicone usually creates more leaks than it helps. So just put the seal in dry, and we want to tighten up the outer bolt on this side first, and then the outer bolt on the far side. And what that'll do is it'll push the head into the head cover into alignment.
I don't know if we said the size of this.
Yeah, this is a T40, and then we are just hand tightening these. We are going to torque these once we're done. And you can see right there, it went a little bit and it had some resistance. So I backed off and I restarted it until it was a good thread. If you're using an air impact or electric impact, that would have been a cross-threaded bolt, and you would have not been happy when you're buying a new head. Now these will go to 100 inch-pounds also. We'll start at the middle and work our way out. Now we hook up the vapor hose, push the clamp back on. Now we'll,
That's more of a question.
yeah.
Answer it in the video, but.
Yeah, so I'll do it right here. So then you put your coolant line back on, and then after you get this all together and you fire it up, it's never a bad idea after you get, you know, a couple heat cycles on the motor without load, obviously, you know, without RPM because the cams are brand new. Change out the oil, do a fresh oil change. That way, any particles or anything that possibly got contaminated in the oil, you're starting fresh, and you're always better off with fresh components if you start with fresh oil. And then we get all the coils back in place.
Do those matter? They're all the same?
All the coils are identical. It does not matter which hole they go in. All that matters is that we get the correct plugs on the correct coils. And I have this engine set up so they're all 10 millimeter on the Pro R. This end one will be 8 millimeter. But since I'm in and out of this engine a lot, I made them all the same. These are a long life spark plug. I would imagine most of the Pro Rs that are doing cams are fairly new. If your vehicle is older, before this step would be a good time to put plugs in.
Roughly hours, mileage.
I'd say if you have 5 to 10,000 miles would be a good time to put plugs in. All right. And then these are torqued to 100 inch-pounds also because they're a 6 millimeter thread. Yeah, so these are coil on plug, and I'll tell you a little bit about coil on plug. Coil on plug are a more efficient spark because the spark doesn't have to travel through a wire. The coil is directly on top of the plug, and you get a hotter spark with less radio interference, and it's a better setup. All high-end motors you'll see with coil on plugs. So the fact that this engine has coil on plugs, and also the Pro XP has coil on plugs, is a real good design. So now that we have the cams in, everything's tied back up, you're going to want to top off your coolant, fire it up, make sure that it's circulating, that there's no air pockets, and make sure that the radiator is getting warm, and the thermostat's opening at about 170. If you see it going over 200, shut it off. You have air somewhere, so you got to figure that out. But sometimes they take a little bit to bleed, but shutting it off, restarting it when it's topped off, a lot of times will do the trick. These things do bleed fairly easy just because of how they're designed with the bleed port off the head and whatnot, and where the reservoir is. So Joey Strub signing out, Installation Nation. We'll see you in the next video.